How's it going, hockey fans? It's me, Two Pad Stack here, and today we are going to be discussing free agency and some of the trades that have gone down. We're going to go team by team, discussing who they picked up and what trades they've made. I was waiting to make this video until Pietrangelo signed, but he just won't sign. But Taylor Hall signed, so that's good enough for me. So let's get right to it. Ducks have picked up Kevin Shattenkirk for 3 years at $3.9 million a year. I think that this is a good deal for Anaheim. He's a good defenseman. He really proved himself this year in Tampa Bay. I don't know if... I know Anaheim needs a lot more help on their blue line. I don't know really why they picked him up, though, because they are a bit in a rebuild, but right now... Damn it, okay. So starting off with the Anaheim Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks right now are trying to be a team on the rise. They picked up Kevin Shattenkirk for 3 years at $3.9 million per year. He's a good defenseman. He's a great presence in the blue line. He can be a leader in the locker room, a great veteran presence. I think that this is a good pickup for Anaheim as they want to get better next year. And I think that Anaheim made a really good deal here. Next up, the Arizona Coyotes picked up Tyler Pitlick for 2 years at $1.75 million a year. He is a depth center. He can probably also play the wing for them. Arizona losing Taylor Hall at this point. They're going to need some depth scoring. Although Tyler Pitlick had 20 points last year, and that was on the Flyers, and the Flyers can score. It's kind of a mysterious black hole that Arizona has where guys go there and they stop scoring. So I'm going to be very interested to see how Tyler Pitlick can help them in a depth role. Sorry, Boston, you didn't do anything in the past couple days, so except lose Torrey Krug. So, yeah. All right, next up we have the Buffalo Sabres with some of the more mystifying things. They re-signed Demgus Girgensons for 3 years at $2.2 million a year. They signed Cody Eakin at 2 years, $2.25 million. I really like Cody Eakin. He was a really, really good depth center on the Golden Knights. When we traded him, he just didn't really have a place in the lineup anymore. In Buffalo, he can get you 40 points in a season. Cody Eakin is a really good player. I was disappointed with what the Golden Knights got back for him when they traded him to Winnipeg, but he is a good third-line center. And I think Buffalo can really use his depth scoring. And lastly, Buffalo decided today to do something mystifying, and they're the team that got the Taylor Hall sweepstakes. He signed for 1 year at $8 million. It's kind of weird. Taylor Hall all season was saying, I want to win, and I want a long-term deal. Going to Buffalo, a team that hasn't made the playoffs in about a decade, and for a year, isn't really what I expected Taylor Hall to do. And $8 million was a little bit less than I thought he would be signing for. I think Taylor Hall gets a little bit overrated by his status when he won the Hart Trophy a couple years ago. He's kind of like Phil Kessel, where he's not the main guy who should be leading a team, but he should be the guy he's part of a core. He shouldn't be the guy, but he should be a part of the core. He is a good scorer. My only thing is he going to win in Buffalo? And I don't think he is. Next up, Calgary did something that I liked a little bit more. So Calgary picked up 2 goalies and 2 defensemen. Jacob Markstrom from the Canucks, he got a 6x6 contract, meaning 6 years at $6 million per. The Canucks were not going to be able to make that contract, but the Canucks did make up for it, which I will get into later. I think that this is a really good signing for Calgary. He's definitely an upgrade in their goaltending position. Yeah, he's definitely an upgrade over Cam Talbot. I think that and David Rittich. If David Rittich is your backup guy or in a 1B position, if Markstrom can play 50 games and then you have Rittich for 30 or 32, and we probably won't even play that many games next season. So I think that Markstrom is a really good pickup for Calgary. The second goalie they picked up was Louis Domingue at 1 year for $700,000. Domingue's had a rough go of it, especially last season. But this is strictly basically an AHL signing. I just wanted to talk about it just because Louis Domingue's been around the league a little bit. He's been in 4 teams in the past 3 years, so yeah. Then they picked up 2 D-men, Alexander Petrovic. They got 1 year, $700,000. He's a decent depth guy. He can play the 6th or 7th defenseman. But more importantly, they got Chris Tanev for 4 years at $4.5 million. So Chris Tanev is a rock on the blue line. He was definitely a thorn in the Golden Knights' side when they played them in the second round this year. He is good as a top 2 guy, and if you can put him in your middle 4 or your middle tool on your defensive pairs, that is a great signing, and he can really make up for the loss of TJ Brodie. Next, we have Carolina. I kind of expected Carolina to do more, but they picked up Jesper Fast at 3 years at $2 million. I think that this is a really good pickup for them. He can really help that forward group out. And yeah, I think that Carolina got a really good player and at a pretty darn good deal. So in Chicago news, Chicago has signed Dominic Kubalik and Malcolm Subban. I really like Malcolm Subban. Malcolm Subban is a really great guy. I've met him a couple times. He's really cool. Malcolm Subban, I really want to see him get a starting job and prove himself in this league. This is going to be his big test year, because if Chicago's going with Malcolm Subban as their starting goalie, I really hope Subban can break out this year. That's all I'm saying. Hopefully he can have a Korpisalo level season. And other in Chicago news, Stan Bowman has worked his magic. He turned Artemi Panarin into Nikita Zadorov. He's an absolute magician, and wow, just what a wonderful thing. So Chicago has traded Brandon Saad and Dennis Gilbert to Colorado for Nikita Zadorov and Anton Lindholm. So it's basically Saad for Zadorov. Okay, Chicago. So Chicago's basically going into a rebuild at this point. This is going to be interesting. Jonathan Toews didn't really seem happy about them going into a rebuild at this point. But I think at this point it's time. They won 3 cups. I think that this year, them actually making the playoffs wasn't really a good thing. I think that they really should have gotten a higher pick in the draft instead of trying to get into the playoffs. But, players aren't going to intentionally tank, so whatever. I enjoyed the series against them in the Knights. Corey Crawford really proved himself in that series. He proved that he can still be a decent starting goaltender, and now he's in New Jersey. But we'll get to there when we get there. Next, that's all it for Colorado news, acquiring Brandon Saad, who is a good forward. I'm not going to say anything bad about Saad, just the Panarin deal is kind of a blight against him. Columbus. I was expecting more out of Columbus at this point. Columbus has only picked up Mikko Koivu at 1 year at 1.5 as a depth center. I expected Columbus to be in on Hall. Maybe they pull out a Mike Hoffman and an Eric Haula. Who knows? They still need to sign. Who knows? Maybe Columbus steals Pietrangelo from Vegas. I mean, it's not looking like it at this point, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe Columbus is the mystery team that Nate Schmidt is going to, but do they really need any more on defense? Like, dear God. So yeah, Columbus, Mikko Koivu, good veteran presence for a young team. I think it's a good pickup. I just expected a little bit more out of them at this point. Next up in Dallas news, Dallas has re-signed Radek Faksa and Anton Khudobin. I was actually expecting Khudobin to go somewhere else and to give Ottinger a chance at the backup spot. But, Khudobin is good. 3 years, 3.5. That can be a little bit of a hefty contract at his age, but, it's not like Pavelski's contract. Oh, boy. Although he was good in the playoffs this year. And Radek Faksa, 5 years at 3.25. Good contract for a depth center. Another one. And they picked up from Florida another defenseman in Mark Pysyk for 1 year at $750,000. Mark Pysyk's a decent defenseman. I was under the impression that Pysyk was a pretty good defenseman. I don't. Okay. I must not be too educated on Florida's blue line. Got to learn more about that. Next, we have Detroit. Detroit was way more active than I thought that they were going to be. They acquired Bobby Ryan for a year and $1 million. Good depth forward. And if he can ever discover what he was drafted to be, or even some of the potential, then he can really make a difference for Detroit next year. They picked up John Merrill, one of my favorite defensemen who was on the Knights. I knew Merrill wasn't coming back. He didn't play like the most of the time that DeBoer was there. If you do play him at forward, he is an elite goal scorer, though. So keep that in mind. I'm kidding. He had 1 goal in the 1 game he played forward. So, regular season game. It was against Philadelphia, I remember. But yeah, they signed him at 1 year for $925,000. If Merrill can be a really good depth defenseman at times. The year before this past one, Merrill made some defensive errors that really were kind of. But this past year, Merrill was pretty good when he was playing. So yeah, I think Merrill is a very good pickup for Detroit. Detroit also picked up Thomas Greiss for 2 years at $3.6 million. Thomas Greiss is a pretty decent goaltender at this point. Although before Barry Trotz got there, it really didn't look like he was very good. So it's going to be very interesting seeing him go from such a great defensive team like the Islanders to a not so great defensive team like Detroit. So we'll see how that goes. Detroit also picked up Troy Stecher, who is a defenseman, at 2 years for $1.7 million per year. There were a lot of 2-year contracts and 3-year contracts signed this free agency, probably because of Seattle coming in a couple next year. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how Stecher does because Stecher was a good defenseman for the Canucks. The Canucks lost a lot, mainly due to their salary cap. The big contracts in their bottom 6 really hurt them, especially Louis Eriksson's contract. Although I understand it because next year, Pettersson and Demko are RFAs, and they need to sign those guys. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes for the Canucks there. And lastly, Detroit picked up Vladislav Nemesnikov at 2 years for $2 million. Nemesnikov can be a really good player at times. He was pretty freaking good for Colorado during the playoffs and near the end of the season, and he was one of the better players in Ottawa. So if you can get him in your middle 6, he can be a really, really good player. Next, Edmonton, one of the teams who I knew was going to be more active. They picked up Kyle Turris at 2 years at $1.65, way better contract than he had in Nashville. But it is good that Kyle Turris, I think he can be really good as a depth forward for them. So it's going to be really interesting. Tyler Ennis they picked up, who's a good defenseman. Tyson Barrie they picked up, who is a really good defenseman. He had 40-something points in a down year last year as a defenseman, and Toronto fans were complaining about him. I know he makes some errors in the D zone, but having a 40-something points in a year is pretty freaking good, as a defenseman especially. And they signed Mike Smith for 1 year at $2 million. I don't remember who it was, but I saw someone call this the worst signing of free agency. I know Oiler fans really wanted to move on from Mike Smith, and it's going to be interesting to see how a 38-year-old goalie plays next year. Next, the Florida Panthers were one of the more active teams, and supposedly they were in on Nate Schmidt, but now they're not. It's interesting. So they picked up Radko Gudas, who is a piece of crap to play against, and that's why they signed him for 3 years at 2.5. He is a piece of crap to play against. That's why you give him money. It's kind of like Ryan Reeves. Carter Verhaeghe signed. Alex Wennberg signed. 2 guys who are going to be good forwards. Both at 1 year. Carter Verhaeghe was 2 years. Wennberg was 1 year. Verhaeghe $1 million. Wennberg 2.25. Both are going to be good forwards for Colorado. I think that these are good for Florida. These are good signings for Florida. and hopefully they can work out. And lastly, they picked up Vinny Hinostroza at 1 year for $1 million. I know he's older, but Hinostroza was a big part of those Blackhawks teams that won the cup. So he knows how to win. These are the guys that you pick up when you want to start making playoff runs. LA has done nothing. I thought LA was going to be a team to do something now that they have Byfield, and they were pretty freaking good before the pause. So we'll see how it goes, but LA really didn't do anything. Minnesota also really didn't do anything. They picked up Cam Talbot at 3 years at $3.66 a year. This is going to be interesting to see how Minnesota does now with Cam Talbot and Stalock as their tandem. Although it's better than Jones and Dubnyk, I'll tell you that. So yeah, I think Minnesota's gonna be fine on their blue line. Their forward group has really improved over this offseason, especially in the draft. So we'll see how it goes for Minnesota next season. But I think that they're gonna start climbing out of the hole that they've dug themselves in. Montreal really didn't do a lot. I thought Montreal was going to be a little bit bigger of a player. They re-signed Victor Mete for $700,000 for a year. Victor Mete I know he has his downsides, but he is pretty decent. I hope that Victor Mete can find his stride and have a little bit of a breakout season this next year. And Montreal's on their way up now with Suzuki coming out as a superstar in this league. Next, Nashville did a couple interesting moves. They picked up Mark Borowiecki for 2 years at $2 million, and they picked up Matt Benning at 2 years for $1 million. I believe Benning's a defenseman as well. So Nashville's kind of trying to make up their blue line a little bit, even though they really didn't lose a lot on their blue line during this offseason. And they also signed Nick Cousins for 2 years at $1.5 million. I liked Nick Cousins going into the playoffs, but he really didn't perform very well in the playoffs with the Knights. So it's going to be interesting to see how Nick Cousins does see how he does in Nashville. Next up, the Devils picked up a decent second goaltender. They got Corey Crawford at 2 years for $3.9. So now you have Crawford and Blackwood. We now know that Crawford can play well, even in front of a Blackhawks defense that was kind of suspect. And defensively, New Jersey is definitely suspect. It's very interesting to see how that's going to shake up. But Crawford and Blackwood is going to be a pretty decent tandem in this league. The Islanders so far have done nothing. I'm interested to see what that Barzal contract is going to look like. They need to sign Barzal, or he's going to get offer sheeted. I think Columbus, if they're not going to make a move in free agency, I can see Columbus sending out a couple offer sheets. So we'll see how it goes. Next up, the New York Rangers picked up Jack Johnson from the Pittsburgh Penguins at 1 year for $1.15 million. Jack Johnson can have good games, but it seems like the Rangers always have to have that one defenseman who everyone complains about, don't they? Next up, Ottawa. After trading and acquiring him, they have signed Matt Murray at 4 years for $6.25 million. The Leonard contract looks incredible right now, with Markstrom making $6 and Matt Murray making 6.25. Leonard 5x5 looks great right now. Leonard is definitely a better goalie than Matt Murray is. But Matt Murray, they're paying him as the Stanley Cup winning goalie from a couple years ago. So if Matt Murray can find his stride again, then we'll see how he does in Ottawa. I do like the move for Ottawa of acquiring Matt Murray, but at that price, is it really a good move, or is it trying to get to the cap floor? That's what I want to know. Next up, Philly, who I thought was going to be pretty decently active, did nothing. Pittsburgh picked up a couple depth guys in Evan Rodriguez and Mark Jankowski. We'll see how they do. San Jose did a very interesting move. They galaxy-brained it, and they re-signed Kevin Labanc at 4 years for $4.725 million a year. I know he's young. I know he is. He didn't have a very good season this past year. I mean, the entire San Jose team didn't have a very good a very good season this last year. But I know we were all shocked last season when he signed for $1 million, which was crazy. But then he played basically down to that contract this past season. So I don't know what San Jose is doing, giving him almost $5 million a year for the next 4 years. But we'll see how that goes. Next up, the St. Louis Blues picked up Torey Krug. So they got the Torey Krug sweepstakes. He's a very good offensive defenseman. He's a power play quarterback. He is basically their consolation prize for not getting Pietrangelo. So I know Pietrangelo said that he was really surprised that when he found out that they signed Torey Krug, which basically told him he's not going back to St. Louis. 7 years at 6.25. It's going to be really interesting to see how that contract shakes up. But, I like the move for St. Louis. They now have their power play quarterback. And, yeah, they're pretty good for the next year. And another move that I actually really like for St. Louis is they got Kyle Clifford at 2 years for $1 million. That got announced earlier today. Kyle Clifford is a very, very good player who... It's not that he's skilled or he puts up a ton of points. He's just hard to play against. He is a player who hits. He's a player who disturbs things. He gets in fights. He is that guy. He is your enforcer. St. Louis is a tough team to play against, and Kyle Clifford only makes them tougher. Next up, Tampa Bay has re-signed Luke Schenn at $800,000, which is a pretty good move. He's a good, decent defenseman. And they re-signed Pat Maroon, which I really like that move for them at $900,000. Pat Maroon has now won back-to-back Stanley Cups, one in St. Louis and one in Tampa. Tampa needed Pat Maroon to stay because he was really good playing with them and being that physical force that they've needed. And other in Tampa Bay news, they waived Tyler Johnson. And Tyler Johnson is now a free agent. He cleared waivers because no one wanted to pick up that contract that he had, especially with the flat cap at this point. But, I was kind of surprised. Tyler Johnson's a pretty decent player, but I know that Tampa wants to re-sign Sergachev and Cirelli. So it's going to be interesting. And I'll be here to report on that when they re-sign them or if they get offer sheeted. Next up, Toronto has made some really good moves that I like. They picked up Wayne Simmonds at 1 year at 1.5. $5 million last year on the Devils in Buffalo was way too much for Wayne Simmonds at this point in his career. I know he's fought through some awful injuries, but I'm interested to see if he can kind of have a comeback year this year at 1.5. And if he does, that only makes Toronto's blue line even scarier. They picked up TJ Brody, who at 4 years for $5 million. So I like that move. He's very good. He plays the right side, which Toronto really, really needs at this point. And if he's playing with Morgan Rielly, that's the best defense partner that Morgan Rielly's had. And then Zach Bogosian they picked up at 1 year for $1 million. So I like that move also. He just won the cup with Tampa Bay. He's a good depth defenseman. I really like this move for Tampa Bay. And he is... It's not that he puts up points. He is your physical defenseman. And, yeah, I know his possession numbers, as Toronto fans have complained about, aren't great. But he won a cup. He knows how to win. So that's all you really need at this point, if you're Toronto. And also in Toronto news, which I forgot to mention when I talked about New Jersey, Toronto has traded Andreas Janssen, and they received Joey Anderson, who is basically a prospect. It's not really a big trade. Andreas Janssen's left wing. Toronto got a right winger prospect. It's okay for them. I just don't... It's going to be interesting to see how Joey Anderson does, if he can even crack the lineup, because in the forward group, it's really hard to crack that lineup in Toronto. I think Toronto at this point has a really, really good forward group with Wayne Simmonds rounding it out now. They got a veteran presence in their bottom six. I think that Toronto is going to be pretty good next year, and they're going to be a lot better than they were this year. Now we get to Vancouver. Important re-signing. They re-signed Tyler Mott for 2 years at $1.225 million a year. I think that this is a good pickup, good re-signing for Vancouver. They really needed to keep at least part of their blue line intact. You cannot lose 3 defensemen, and they're not the greatest defensive team already, so it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes up this year for them. I don't know if they're regressed if they're going to regress this year, or they're going to stay in the same place. But it's going to be interesting to see if they make the playoffs this year. Although they did sign Braden Holtby at 2 years at 4.3. So I think that is a great pickup for Vancouver. They get a goalie who can now mentor Thatcher Demko, because Thatcher Demko, he was really, really good in those couple of games against the Knights, but I don't know if that proves that he's ready to start now. So it's going to be interesting to see how Braden Holtby does, if he can come back from the season that he had in Washington this past year. Although I think the second year of that contract, I think Demko is the starter for them. Next up, the Golden Knights have re-signed Tomas Nosek at 1 year for 1.5. I really like Nosek. I'm glad that the Knights were able to keep him. Nosek as a really, really good fourth line center. While he won't put up a lot of points, he doesn't really make a lot of defensive errors or mistakes. So I like Tomas Nosek. He's a really well-rounded player, and he has the physical edge that you need on a fourth line. Also, in Golden Knights news, Paul Stastny yesterday morning was traded to the Winnipeg Jets 2 days ago for a fourth, and Carl Dahlstrom, who is basically he's a seventh defenseman, basically. I don't know if Dahlstrom is going to be the seventh defenseman for the Knights this year, or if he's going to be playing the AHL. I would assume that Nick Hague would be the seventh defenseman if Nate Schmidt gets traded at this point, and they sign Pietrangelo. But we'll see, because it looks like right now the Golden Knights are the front runner for Pietrangelo, so it is going to be very interesting. I do like Paul Stastny for Winnipeg. He did have chemistry with Patrik Laine the year that the Jets faced the Golden Knights in the Western Conference Final, and they were knocked out. I do like Stastny. He, at this point in his career, though, he is probably a third-line center, so I don't know if he can fill that second-line center spot, but he did have chemistry with Laine. I don't think Laine gets traded from Winnipeg. I think it's a good thing to re-pick him up. But basically, this was a cap dump for Vegas. I've suggested that you don't trade Fleury, you trade Stastny before. Because at this point, the Golden Knights have Krebs coming up. They have Glass coming up. They have center depth. So there are guys who can take over that second-line center spot if Stastny goes. Or when Stastny goes. Next up, the Washington Capitals have signed Henrik Lundqvist at $1.5 million for 1 year. I don't know if this is Lundqvist's last year. It probably is, but who knows at this point. So their goalies are Lundqvist and Samsonov. Who knows? Because Lundqvist was not getting a job in New York. He just wasn't. So it's going to be interesting. Although Washington did get 2 new defensemen. They got Justin Schultz from Pittsburgh at 2 years for $4 million, and they got Trevor Van Riemsdyk at 1 year at $800,000. Trevor Van Riemsdyk notably was a Golden Knight for about 3 seconds until they traded him immediately after the expansion draft. Justin Schultz is a very good defenseman for Pittsburgh, or he was very good for Pittsburgh. He's more of an offensive defenseman, but I think that in Washington, that's kind of what they need. They need a little bit more scoring from their blue line. I know they have John Carlson, but other than that, I think they need a little bit more scoring down there. Next up, the Winnipeg Jets have re-signed Nathan Beaulieu at 2 years at 1.5. It's a good re-signing for them. He is a depth scorer. I think this is another good signing for Winnipeg. And then in free agency, they signed Nate Thompson at a year, $750,000, and they signed Derek Forbort at 1 year, $1 million contract. So it's going to be interesting to see how these signings really affect Winnipeg in the future, and if they can help them make the playoffs this coming year. Also, I forgot to mention, Ryan Murray was traded to the New Jersey Devils for a 5th-round pick. New Jersey wins that trade. I know it was a cap dump for Columbus, and this is why I thought that Columbus was going to do something big with their buyouts and trading Murray, but they just haven't done it yet. Ryan Murray is a pretty good top 6 player, so we'll see how he does in New Jersey. My only concern with New Jersey is if they can stop letting the puck in the net. So, yeah. All right, and lastly, the notable free agents that have not signed yet. Alex Pietrangelo, Mike Hoffman, Evgeny Dadonov, Tyler Toffoli, Mikhail Granlund, Ilya Kovalchuk, Travis Hamonic, and Erik Haula. So yeah, as of my recording of this, I'm gonna check Twitter right before I upload it just to see if any of these guys got signed before I upload, but we'll see how it goes. And of course, like clockwork, it's the Toronto Maple Leafs that spite me. The Toronto Maple Leafs have signed Jimmy Vesey for $800,000 for 1 year. Jimmy Vesey was really overhyped when he came into the league. He went from the Rangers to Buffalo, and now he's with Toronto. If Jimmy Vesey can ever recapture what he was supposed to be originally, the Maple Leafs have made a really good signing. But it's going to be interesting to see if Vesey can even make the lineup in Toronto, or if he can push someone out. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see how Jimmy Vesey does in Toronto. I don't know really how I feel about the signing at this point, but hey, we'll see how it goes. So that's it for tonight, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.